welcome back to Pokemon Aurus Wi-Fi battles for ASMR. This week I built a competitively viable underused team and I got some pretty cool battle spot battles during the week. So this video is going to be showcasing 3 of those with a selection of my new Pokemon. So this first battle against Andre, he leads with a Gardevoir and I lead with Sableye, typically trying to get the Taunt or Will-O-Wisp first turn. Gardevoir is not the kind of Pokemon to set up or be a physical attacker, so I immediately swap out to Crobat to try and tank the incoming Fairy type attack from the Mega Gardevoir. Crobat is not the bulkiest Pokemon, it can be, but my set is not. But due to its natural bulk and type resistance, the Hyper Voice manages to do only under half damage. Now they would be fearing a poison type or bug type attack like U-turn from my Crobat and decide to swap into their Lapras. I opted to go for U-turn just to scout out to see what they wanted to do while still hitting Gardevoir's weakness if they wanted to stay in. Typically Lapras are physically attacking with Avalanche to take advantage of their low speed and Ice Shard to try and revenge kill low HP Pokemon. So I decided to go for a Will-O-Wisp to cripple its physical attack. Unfortunately it shows that it's a special attacking Lapras and does just over half damage with Hydro Pump. Sableye's Citrus Berry is popped and manages to heal a fair bit of health, while the Lapras follows up with an Ice Beam. I decide to use Foul Play to reduce a bit of Lapras' health and see how much damage that would do, while it is also being chipped away from the burn. I decide to go for a Recover to try and stall out these Hydro Pumps, none of which seem to miss, which is annoying, but we live it fine, so I suppose that's okay. While the burn continues to do some residual damage to the Lapras. When it gets to about a quarter health left, I decide to just stall it out with Recover, hope for a Hydro Pump miss, and then the next turn I could go for a Foul Play or the like. But every single Hydro Pump hits, so all I can do is keep Sableye alive with Recover to try and, use it later on in the battle. Lapras is going to continue to go for Hydro Pump and hits yet another one. I think that's 4 without missing, but finally succumbs to its burn and faints. So now I have the opportunity to recover some of Sableye's health against a physically attacking Garchomp. Garchomp is a very, very common Pokemon in Battle Spot, but I find that this Sableye set in particular is super effective at shutting it down. So the Garchomp goes for a Dragon Claw, which Sableye tanks pretty well, as I go for a Will-O-Wisp in attempt to cripple the Garchomp's physical attack. Unfortunately, due to Sableye's low health, the Garchomp is still able to take it out with an Earthquake, but the damage is already done. Garchomp is not going to be able to KO the rest of my team very easily. So I decide to send in my special attacking Nidoqueen, who has Life Orb and Sheer Force, and the Garchomp goes for an Earthquake, which definitely would have taken out Nidoqueen had Sableye not burned it and reduced its attack stat. Nidoqueen is able to return fire with an Ice Beam to hit Garchomp for 4 times super effective damage and takes it out in pretty much one hit with a little help from Sableye's Will-O-Wisp damage. So the opponent's Gardevoir finally comes back out after swapping out pretty much first turn and is able to revenge kill my Nidoqueen with Psychic. There was no way I could have swapped out there since Crobat is also weak to Psychic. I needed to rely on Crobat being fast with Choice Scarf to take out the Gardevoir with a nice cross poison. Alvaro is our second opponent today, and this battle is a very good example of being able to correctly predict everything and still losing in the end. So the first thing I want to note about this opponent is that I don't believe their Pokemon were competitively viable. This Aegislash has Night Slash and Shadow Claw, so 2 Ghost type attacking moves. It also holds Quick Claw, which is not reliable and competitive. and you'll see later that their Sylveon has 2 fairy type attack moves, which it's just a bit redundant, so yeah, there are better sets out there. Anyway, my typical Aegis-Slash counter is Sableye with Taunt to prevent any sword stances or King Shield, which this opponent does not seem to want to go for. But the Will-O-Wisp also comes in handy for reducing Aegis-Slash's attack. I decided to go for Foul Play and just finish off the Aegis-Slash, as it gets a critical hit with Night Slash and pops my Citrus Berry, which honestly would have been handy to have around later, but it's no big deal. So Sableye takes out the Aegis-Slash with a Foul Play, as we've seen before, and this team also has a Darkrai, so the Darkrai Aegis-Slash combo is apparently pretty popular, as Alvaro sends out Sylveon. So, you know, fairy type attack incoming, so I decided to swap into Crobat, who's once again able to tank the Moonblast. It does very little damage, so I don't believe that this Sylveon would have been bred for competitive battling. I feel like it would have done a little bit more damage. And then yeah, follows up with Dazzling Gleam, which is still resisted by Crobat and does even less damage, I'm pretty sure. Crobat's Cross Poison just misses the knockout due to Sylveon's natural bulk, but does snag the poison, which is enough to bring it down to nearly 1 HP. So Crobat is able to finish off Sylveon with another Cross Poison. The final Pokemon that Alvarez sends out is Darkrai, and we all know how to shut down a Darkrai, but not knowing what exactly this Darkrai wanted to do, I decided to stay in with Crobat and hit it with a Cross Poison, which does some pretty solid damage. We get a critical hit and do about half health. Darkrai reveals that it has Ice Beam and succeeds in taking out my Crobat. Now, I'm not familiar with a lot of Darkrai sets, so I don't know if Ice Beam is a typical move that it runs. In the previous video we had a Darkrai that was running Thunderbolt, but anyway. I decided to send in Sableye and use Taunt to prevent the Dark Void, which it does turn out to have, and I go for a Will-O-Wisp that misses unfortunately, allowing Darkrai to hit me with another Ice Beam. And since Sableye isn't a special defensive wall, it's not taking it too great. And Recover is getting a lot more health back than Ice Beam is able to damage, but it's not looking good for Sableye basically. There's not really a way I can win this. So I decided to give the Darkrai a parting gift with a nice Will-O-Wisp to get some residual damage. My final Pokemon is Goodra, who is of course weak to Ice-type moves, being a Dragon type, but Goodra has amazing special defense, and it can be a solid physical or special attacker. So this Goodra is max special defense, max special attack, I believe, with choice specs. So I went for Draco Meteor here just to ensure the kill. Unfortunately, Ice Beam gets a critical hit and freezes me, which would be no problem since the critical hit did half damage, so I'd be able to live and thaw myself with Flamethrower. Unfortunately, Darkrai gets another critical hit and is able to take out my Goodra. So had I used Flamethrower that first turn instead of Draco Meteor, we would have had that win in the bag. This brings us to our third and final battle. It's quite a long one, but it's pretty entertaining, so I hope you guys enjoy this. So our third opponent leads with an Espeon and decides to mix his team up with Skarmory and Umbreon, and I lead with Crobat, and my first attack is a U-turn using Choice Scarf to get a lot of solid damage onto the Espeon and swap into Umbreon in the same turn to prevent taking any damage from Psychic. Our opponent swaps out into Skarmory, I believe, possibly predicting the Toxic, but I decided to stay in and use Snarl, which is a pretty cool move for Umbreon since it drops special attack, making Umbreon even bulkier in special defense. I also went for Snarl just in case the Espeon wanted to stay in and I could knock it out with that. Yeah, but they predicted Toxic and swapped into Skarmory. So I don't believe they predicted any swaps. They probably expected me to stay in and go for a Toxic on Umbreon, whose Synchronize wouldn't be able to work on a Steel type, but I swapped out into Goodra. Now they're not sure what move I want to go for, so they swap out into Umbreon, who is able to eat up this flamethrower. It still does alright damage, but it's definitely not the damage I was looking for on that Skarmory. Realising that I could do worse by swapping out, I decided to stay in with Goodra and continue going for Flamethrower, which I'm locked into with choice specs. The Umbreon decides to go for Moonlight and heals all of its HP back while my Goodra is getting whittled down by Toxic. So I decide that I'm not getting anywhere fast, let's swap into my Umbreon, because there's nothing their Umbreon can do. Predicting my switch, they go for a Toxic and successfully poison my Umbreon. My Synchronized triggers and poisons their Umbreon. Their Synchronized triggers and attempts to poison my Umbreon. It's just poisons flying everywhere at the moment. Their Umbreon unfortunately has a Lumberry, which manages to cure its poisoning, but my Umbreon is actually a bit of a cleric, so it carries Heal Bell and Wish and that kind of thing. So my Umbreon can heal my whole team, whereas that Umbreon is now susceptible to any further status ailments. I believe they were expecting a Toxic to repoison their Umbreon there, but I decided to go for the Heal Bell to heal up Goodra and Umbreon both. So now, with nothing much to do to this Skarmory, I'm pretty sure I go for a Wish here to try and pass some health back to Goodra. The Skarmory gets a little bit of damage off with Iron Head, but it's definitely no physical sweeper, so I'm not too frustrated about that. My best bet here is to swap back into Goodra to collect the Wish from Umbreon. If you're not familiar with Wish, what happens with Wish is whatever Pokemon uses Wish, half of their max health heals whatever Pokemon is in that Pokemon slot on the next turn, so you can swap out, collect the Wish from a different Pokemon, say my Goodra, and Umbreon will be fine. So I can actually go for the double swap here, expecting them to swap into Umbreon to absorb any physical attacks, any special attacks, pardon me, and I decide to hit it with a Super Fang. Super Fang's a great move for whittling down walls and, steel types that you can't hit otherwise. So it does half of their current HP in damage. The Umbreon reveals itself to be a Swagger Foul Play Umbreon, and not wanting to risk getting KO'd by Foul Play or, confusion damage on Crobat due to its insanely high attack stat, I decided to not muck around with the confusion and just swap straight out into Goodra. I decided to go for Muddy Water here to get neutral damage on anything that wants to swap in, and also, lower the accuracy, but it misses unfortunately, and Umbreon is able to stay in and get a Swagger off on my Goodra. Again, not wanting to fall into the Swagger Foul Play trap, I swap back into Umbreon to absorb the incoming Foul Play. Umbreon isn't really a physical defensive wall, but it has 0 IVs in attack, I believe, to lower confusion and Foul Play damage, and it also resists it due to the attack and Umbreon both being Dark type. So I believe they're predicting a Toxic coming in here and swapping to Skarmory, but I knew better than that and decided to go for a Snarl just to get some incoming damage on the Skarmory coming in. Obviously Skarmory's not a special attacker, so the stat drop is negligible, but it's actually doing not bad damage considering Umbreon is not in any form an attacker. The Skarmory goes for a Roost and heals up all its HP, while I decide to just stay in and do some more damage with Snarl, trying to trick them into making a mistake, something I can work with here, because otherwise we're just going to be swapping back and forth. You also have to remember that while we're playing, the timer is ticking down. We only have half an hour for this battle, and we only had 4 minutes left by the time the battle ended. Now, predicting the Toxic, I swap out into Crobat and go for a Super Fang to do half of Skarmory's remaining HP damage, and I figure out that it has Rocky Helmet, so anytime I do a physical attack or a contacting attack on this Skarmory, my Pokemon are going to be taking damage from Rocky Helmet, while it can just heal up with Roost. So I figure out the only way to really get rid of this thing is to hit it with a solid special attack. The Skarmory goes for another Roost, possibly expecting another Super Fang, but I didn't want to risk it. I didn't really have a reliable way of healing Crobat, aside from swapping into Umbreon and then swapping back. But that would be a couple of turns of damage if they decided to go for an attacking move. So I swap into Goodra, try and attack the Skarmory with the Flamethrower, but they send in their Umbreon to take 2 Flamethrowers to the face and return with a Swagger. Flamethrower was an alright move to use against Umbreon. It wasn't doing heaps of damage, it was doing about a quarter each time, but what I was really looking for was a burn that I knew that this Umbreon could no longer heal, otherwise it wouldn't keep swapping out when the possibility to Toxic it arose. So I swap into Crobat as the Umbreon goes for a Moonlight, and I believe Umbreon swaps out into Skarmory to absorb, I assume, the U-turn that they were predicting that I, went for, so correct prediction on their behalf. The U-turn does absolutely no damage to Skarmory, does possibly 1 HP, and Crobat actually takes more damage from Rocky Helmet than it dealt out with U-turn. So I swap into Goodra, attempting to scare out the Skarmory, and finally manage to predict the Umbreon coming in. I decide to drop a Draco Meteor in an attempt to do as much damage to this annoying wall as I can. And it works out in my favour, it does about 3/4 damage. There's no way it's living 2 of those. Unfortunately, Draco Meteor lowers my special attack by 2 stages, and I'm not sure if I'm faster than the Umbreon or not, so predicting the Moonlight I swap into Crobat. This gives me more options. I can hit it with a U-turn or a Super Fang if I wanted. I can scare it out, anything like that. I end up going for the double switch back into Goodra, hoping that they'd swap into Skarmory, but I believe they stay in and go for Swagger, which was a pretty good prediction on their part. So I just hit the Umbreon with another Draco Meteor since Swagger missed the first time, and there's nothing really stopping me going for that. They were possibly expecting me to go for Flamethrower there, predicting their Skarmory to come in, but I just wanted to get some damage on this Umbreon, so I just went for my strongest attack. This time the Umbreon lands the Swagger, and Goodra becomes confused. Still trying to avoid the foul play, I swap out into Umbreon to absorb the incoming foul play, but I believe the Umbreon goes for a Moonlight just to get its health back, since if I did break through confusion, I would have been able to take that out and that kind of thing, but if I didn't, then they could heal perfectly fine. So my Umbreon gets a little bit of health back from leftovers, now at full HP as their Umbreon swaps out into Skarmory in an attempt to absorb the Toxic, which was another good prediction on their behalf. I hadn't gone for Toxic too much with this Umbreon, so they made a good call there to swap into Skarmory. In return, they managed to Toxic my Umbreon, but as we know, I've got Heal Bell, so it's nothing for me to worry about. What would have worried me was possibly Thunderwave, since that would actually prevent me from healing, prevent me from attacking and slow me down even further. So knowing that there's not a lot this Skarmory can do to me, not wanting to get a Toxic on any of my other Pokemon, I decided to stay in and hit it a couple of times with Snarl. The trick with this Skarmory is that I don't want to do so much damage so they go for Roost until I'm ready to predict that, but also still want to get a fair amount of damage so that something can come in and ignore its sturdy, basically, and try and kill it with one more shot. So now that I've done about half damage, I'm predicting them to go for a Roost, so I swap into Goodra to try and get a free swap in, no damage, no Toxic, nothing annoying like that. Finally, I managed to hit the Skarmory with a Flamethrower and take it down to its sturdy. I believe they probably predicted me to predict them to swap into Umbreon and go for Draco Meteor, but I decided to just go for Flamethrower since any damage would be good damage. The Skarmory gets a Toxic off on my Goodra. Again, not really much of a problem, we can heal that up. No worries with Heal Bell. And they swap out to save their 1 HP Skarmory for Death Fodder or Rocky Helmet damage, whichever they prefer. I go for Flamethrower to either finish off the Skarmory or get some damage on the incoming Umbreon, and I actually managed to snag a burn on Umbreon, which is really good. Burns constant damage, reduces their attack, which isn't applicable here, but I know that this Umbreon can't heal itself, so I'm pretty happy getting a status condition on it. Toxic would have definitely killed it faster, but Burn is still pretty good. They have to concentrate on keeping themselves alive and not being able to attack and not being able to status me and all that kind of thing. So predicting their Moonlight or possibly a Toxic, I swap into Crobat and I go for the super effective U-turn, which in the end doesn't even do too much damage considering Crobat's high attack and Umbreon being a special defense wall primarily. But I suppose it does have good natural bulk as well. So I swap back into Goodra. I'm going to try and hit it with a Draco Meteor, but Umbreon gets the swagger off on my Goodra. And honestly, this makes me want to swap out again. I don't want to give this any openings with foul play, swagger, any of that nonsense. So I'm pretty sure I swap back out here. So Goodra is recalled and we swap back into Crobat, who honestly can U-turn and swap back in all day. There's really nothing this Umbreon can do to it, as it unfortunately goes for a Moonlight. So it's keeping itself in there, but it's definitely on a timer. I've got 2 attackers that can take it out. I've got an Umbreon that can stall it out with Wish and Heal Bell and all that kind of thing. It's not looking good for our opponent. Predicting a physical attack, they swap in their Skarmory. I decided to go for the all-out Brave Bird and basically do as much damage as I could to whatever wanted to come in and take it. The Skarmory takes its 1 HP damage and faints, and I get damaged by the Rocky Helmet, quite a bit of damage on that, and I get 1 HP damage for the recoil for Brave Bird. Crobat's locked into Brave Bird and it'll do solid damage to the Umbreon, I figure, so I just stay in and go for it. Does about half damage and I get a lot of recoil. The Umbreon goes for Swagger, still attempting to pull off the Swagger Foul Play combo, or, just get me to switch out so I don't kill it, since I have, in the past, only been switching out once they confuse me. So I do in fact switch out here into my Umbreon to absorb the incoming Foul Play. They were probably hoping to trip me up and take me out with my own attack stat, boosted by Swagger, but being a user of Foul Play, I'm not as easy to trap with that. So my Umbreon swaps in, takes a little bit of poison damage since I haven't healed it yet. Their Umbreon takes flame damage, burn damage from the flamethrower earlier. Not enough to take it out, unfortunately, so it's going to be able to heal this turn while I remove the status from my Umbreon and my Goodra. So the opposing Umbreon goes for Moonlight, gets to about half health again, so it's going to be a bit more of a slog to take it out. It's managing to keep itself in there, but we're slowly and surely whittling it down. More burn damage brings it down to about 1/3 health left, as I decide to go for a Wish to pass it into my to Crobat possibly, who has lower health at the moment, as the opposing Umbreon goes for a Swagger. Probably not one of the best moves to use on Umbreon since Foul Play is not going to do much to me. I'm not going to stay in very much. I'm a cleric healer, so I'm going to do my job and get out. I'm not going to linger around. But I managed to pass my Umbreon's Wish into Goodra. The opposing Umbreon is of course going to go for Swagger, desperately trying to make this Swagger Foul Play combo work. It does succeed on making me switch though, so it buys them a little time to heal up or what have you. In fact, if I was them, I'd go for Moonlight this turn, predicting my own switch, especially since they have very low health. Now for the first time I actually stay in and decide to try and fight through the confusion and manage to land a Draco Meteor on the Umbreon, finally finishing off this pesky special wall once and for all. No more healing, no more Swagger, no more Foul Play, no more switching. All they have left is their Espeon. So I'm not exactly sure what their strategy was here, but I swapped out into Umbreon predicting some sort of psychic attack, I guess. They actually go for Trick and end up swapping a Choice Specs onto my Umbreon and receiving my Leftovers. So I guess it would have been a good move if Leftovers heals for a little bit more, because that does actually bring them back up into yellow. but now I have a choice specs with, a dark type move that I can hit it with, and they just powered down their own Dazzling Gleam. So I hit the Espeon with a Snarl, which has like 20 base power, doesn't do very much at all, and managed to take out the Espeon. So after a long 26 minutes, I win the third battle. I'd like to thank you for watching these Pokemon battles. I apologise if I talk a little fast, it's hard to keep up with the content sometimes, but hopefully you still get a bit of a kick out of these videos. I hope to see you guys next time.